We are not doctors. Nothing in this podcast should be taken as medical advice. Consult your physician before starting any workout routine. This is the Martial Heart Podcast.
Hey, how are you? Welcome back. So, an update for everyone. That's what this is going to be. If you tuned in last week, you know that I was going back into the Heart Cath lab, the Cath lab, as they affectionately call it, for some additional stuff. We did the Lexa scan, we did the stress test, the chemical stress test. We did all that stuff a couple of weeks ago. The cardiologist didn't like what he saw, so he said, we're going to go back in and we're going to figure out what's going on with that. So essentially what he said was that the left side of my heart wasn't getting enough blood, or at least it appeared that way, and there was scarring and some other stuff, and ischemia, which is just a narrowing of the arteries, I guess. So it appeared to him like there was maybe one of the stents had failed, or an additional one was needed, or an angio was needed somewhere. So we went back in and he didn't find the problem. So going in with the heart cath and the contrast fluid and all that stuff, the dye that they put in there, he checked everything. I was in there for about 45 minutes, I guess, while they moved around and pushed the thing in different sections of my heart into different arteries and things like that. And they didn't find a failed stent. All the stents appear to be holding up. And he didn't find a place where he needed to do any additional intervention. So he didn't do an angio or put a new stent in. So after all of that, essentially, we're just back to square one. And nobody knows why I'm having this chest pressure. So fun times, back to square one, trying to figure out what's going on. And it was explained that there are smaller veins and arteries around the heart that they don't get into, or that they can't get into, things like that, that might be what's causing the chest pressure, but they can't really intervene with those. Or at least that's kind of my understanding of it. The person in the cath lab and the cardiologist have both said similar things, that it could be, some of the smaller things around the heart that are, restricted or something like that. And that's what's causing the pressure in the chest. But no answers. Nothing new came out of this. So I went into the lab and spent all day in a hospital. Got a giant funnel shoved into my arm so they could put a cath. I know it's not really a giant funnel, but that's how it feels after it's been in your arm for an hour or so. And I had to take a couple of days off work to, go through this process and have a recovery day and all of that. And now I'm going back to work tomorrow, not feeling any better than I did on Wednesday of last week. So back to square one. Happy times. Something to look forward to. We don't know what to do. The doctor just said we're going to continue with the medications and maybe make some adjustments to that and see if that makes a difference, so on and so forth, yada, yada, yada. Same thing that doctors say all the time. And so, I don't know. Maybe it will get better with time. Over the last few months, it seems like it's gotten worse, but maybe it will improve with some time and some, more intensive cardio training or something. I don't know, but we're about to find out, because they aren't going to do anything additional to my heart, at least not now. And it is kind of funny when I talk to people when they're in there and they're prepping me and everything. They talk about what's going on, and they look at the chart and they're like, "Oh, you've been through this before." I'm like, "Yeah." And they've cathed me 3 times so far. Once was just an exploratory thing, and then twice for interventions in the peripheral arteries in the lower body and in the cardiac last time. So they start talking, and I'm like, "Yeah, I already have 9 9 stents. Like, what? They've never met anybody who had that many stents. So it's kind of entertaining to watch them react to that. I think the only good thing that came out of it was having a very interesting interaction my wife and I did with a nurse. And it was fascinating because she had an accent. She had an obvious accent. Not that she didn't speak English properly or anything, but she had an accent. And I've always been fascinated by accents and people's languages, so I'm pretty good at spotting an accent. And I couldn't place it. It was so strange. I couldn't place it. I was going all over the world in my mind, all the different people that I've met, with different accents from different regions of the world, and I was making comparisons in my head, and my wife was doing the same thing, and she's like, "What is it? Where's this accent from?" And I couldn't pinpoint it either. And so when she came back into the room, I just asked her. I was like, "Where are you from?" And she said, "This is fun because everybody asks me these kind of questions." So she had us try to guess, and I guessed Venezuela. That was the only. Yeah, I didn't assume that she was from Venezuela. I was just throwing something out there because she had an accent that sounded like, whatever they would call it now, Latina or Hispanic, whatever you want to call it. But it was weird. It wasn't quite like someone from Brazil with like a Portuguese accent or anything like that. So I couldn't place it. And so eventually we gave up. My wife and I gave up. And she explained it to us that she was Canadian. And okay, I know that sounds funny, but she started saying, like, "I'm a neighbor. I'm one of your neighbors here in your country." And I'm like, that narrows it down to 2 places. And so anyway, she was a Canadian who only spoke French. Years ago, when she moved to the United States, when she immigrated here, she immigrated to Miami, Florida. So when she was learning to speak English, everyone spoke with an accent. She said she learned from Cubans and Argentinians and Haitians, and even her English teachers in school and in college when she went to nursing school all had accents because she was in Miami. So she learned to speak English with like a Cuban accent with a French flavor to it, which anyway made it impossible to pinpoint where this lady was from. And she was very sweet. She was very nice. And it became a fun game for us to play with her while she inserted IVs and did different things. But it was fascinating. I've never met someone as unique as that who learned to speak English. Now, I've encountered people who learned to speak English in odd ways, and so they had odd accents, but not someone who had a French accent already when they're trying to speak English, and now they're adding in Argentinian and Cuban and Haitian, different little tweaks in the language. So it was pretty fascinating. But that was the only good that came of it, other than I'm fairly well rested because I had a couple of days off, and even though they didn't do any new interventions or anything, it's still exhausting because you're always nervous the night before, so you're up all night. Off and on, you might be dozing off here and there, and then you have to get there hours before the procedure actually starts, and they have to do all this and do all that, and then it's a long day no matter what. And and then you have the disappointment of we didn't learn anything new, so now we still don't know why I have these bouts of chest pressure. So I don't know. Anyway, back to square one, as I've been saying. And I'm sure it'll be okay. I would just like to know the answer to some of those things, but I'm going to continue exercising and see what happens, see if it does improve. If it doesn't improve, but it doesn't impact my ability to do things, then I guess I will just have to learn to live with it, sort of. And maybe get back to some of the more intensive things that I want to do, but I don't know for sure. I'm at this point, when I go back to talk to the doctors and talk to the cardiologist and things like that, I may have to just ask them point blank, what do you think my limitations are? I was hoping we wouldn't have any, and I was kind of told by the doctors that I really shouldn't have any. Everything should be okay. You can go back to your normal routine. And I don't think that's true anymore. I don't think they think that anymore either. So, but it's something I'll have to figure out as we go along. But I just wanted to update everybody. Disappointing news. I guess the good news is there wasn't anything wrong that they needed to fix. But the bad news is I don't know anything other than what I knew when I went in there. So if anything changes, I'll let you know. And I'll hop back on here pretty soon and do another podcast. And we can follow along on my journey and see what I do with my physical fitness thing. I'm trying to come up with some different ideas now, since I've decided I probably shouldn't go back to something like jiu-jitsu right now because of the blood thinners and all the bleeding problems and so on and so forth. So I'm going to try to come up with something else and see what I can do and tolerate with my condition. So stay tuned, and I will keep you posted. And until then, take care of yourselves, be good to each other, and I don't know, just do other stuff. Be nice. Something like that. I don't know. I don't have anything really philosophical to say at the end of this. So now you're just listening to this cool music, I guess. Anyway. Okay, bye.